And we continue with the year of Stephen King. Rather a biggie this particular video, because it is the adaptation of The Long Walk, which, considering that The Long Walk is a very introspective story with something of minimal action. You know, you're ultimately watching a group of young men walking, and there isn't really much more to it. There is something about the way it's presented, the world building, the intensity of the experience, and the character work that makes this film just exceptionally intense. I think having Mark Hamill appear as this overshadowing figure in the Colonel, you know, giving him a villainous role insofar as it's someone to point at and say, that is our villain. But frankly, there is something more institutional about it, something more insipid in respect of the world in which this exists is much darker and much more about the society that has led to the brutality that leads to these boys being so badly treated and essentially giving their lives for nothing. And as you can imagine, you can see the underlying commentary that is being made about particularly American jingoism and warfare and lives lost in the cause of nothing that is trying to be told in the subtext of the narrative. But in addition to that, you see the brotherhood and the love between young men. And I think, strangely, in a narrative very much about a toxic environment, it weirdly presents an anti-toxic masculine narrative about people who are bonded through trial, and the fact that one by one we see characters who we really do connect with, you know, whose motives vary, whose expectations of success are very different from each other. And you see those Stephen King tropes, you know, the underlying sort of antagonist who's possibly crazed, the best friend, you know, you get that Stand By Me kind of vibe to it. But in addition, you see one by one these characters fall. And I think the fact that it's very much about the main antagonism is the walk, is the fact we're watching them go one by one, not due to them going up against each other. There is situations where they cause each other problems, but ultimately the failure to complete the walk. And I just think ultimately it's about, you know, you have your characters of Peter and Raymond and their friendship and all the group's friendship together, but ultimately there will only be one person standing, walking at the end. And I think it builds to this heartbreak as you watch one by one characters who you bond with, who you learn to understand, fall in a very tragic series of deaths that is presented very brutally. You know, it doesn't shy away from showing how cruel the deaths of most of these characters are. And I think consequently it's a very intense experience, considering it is just a group of people walking for several days, and it's definitely going to stick with me and is going to be one of the most powerful of the Stephen King stories that has been presented this year.